are you all doing today? I'm going to talk about intuition. This is a primary tool for anybody that is on a spiritual path. And even if that doesn't resonate with you, it's really for anybody who wants to live their best life. In this video, I'm going to explore what intuition is and things that can positively and negatively affect our intuition. And I'm also going to give you a few tips on how to develop this sense. Intuition is essentially our connection to something that is greater than us. Call it what you want: universal consciousness, spirit, God. Essentially, it's helping to show us the way through life that is going to be the most expansive for us and the most conducive to our growth and our well-being. It's really the cause of all true inspiration. Now, some people are going to deny that they have a sense of intuition, but I think really that we all have a good sense of intuition. It's just that many of us are so used to ignoring that little voice that is whispering truths to us. I can remember times when I was younger and I was on the precipice of a choice point in life, and I had this calm inner voice saying to me, I can't really see this working out, or this is going to be interesting when this all falls apart. Now, I don't like to say that anything is a bad choice per se, because everything that we experience has its lessons. But, if I'd had the courage to listen to my intuition at these junctures, I know that I would have had an easier experience for sure. For many generations, we have been trained to value logic over our innate sense of knowing. We rationally weigh up the pros and the cons of each decision. And that's fine, but the problem with this is that the rational part of our brain, or a conscious part of our brain, it just isn't able to perceive all the information and variables. So this kind of decision making is flawed. Whereas our subconscious is able to pick up on way more information than we're consciously aware of. And this is what makes the subconscious a much more reliable thing to make our choices in life. And the subconscious is essentially where our intuition comes from. The problem is, unless we have really made an effort to hone our intuition, or we have really some natural psychic tendencies, it can be really hard to recognize our intuition or trust what it is telling us. The voice of intuition is usually quiet and unemotional, so it can easily get drowned out by the emotional voice of our ego. Also, intuition can really lead us in directions that seem really odd to ourselves and those around us. So it often takes great courage to trust that inner guidance system and trust that it's leading us in the right direction. Intuition, though, it's essential to becoming a sovereign being. And, it really does, if we have the courage to follow it, lead us in the direction that is most satisfying to our soul. Now I'm going to list some outside factors that can either help, support, or hinder our intuition coming through. Firstly, who we are hanging out with has a major impact. For example, do your friends, family, and co-workers value intuition? If they don't, it's going to be much harder to trust your inner voice, because there's going to be many other voices telling you other things. It's going to take more courage to go against the grain. Following our path often means we have to make tough choices about who we spend our time with. So this often means like working on our existing relationships so they become more supportive, or it can often mean cutting out toxic people from our lives. Closely related is the overall environment that we're in. Connecting with our intuition requires a certain amount of peace and contemplation. The environment we live in can either be supportive of this or it can take away from it. I'm going to give you 2 examples for contrast. First, imagine living in a small cottage in like woodland next to a lake. The vibe feels peaceful, right? And so this environment is going to be conducive to doing inner work. Now imagine living in an apartment building in a big city with neighbors that are constantly playing loud music and fighting. This scenario is going to be much harder to tune in to ourselves. And it's likely going to be very stressful living there. And, stress is a killer of intuition. That's why many people in modern society struggle to connect in with their inner voice. They're basically just too stressed out from their work life or their home life. That brings me nicely to my next point. People often use food and drink as coping mechanisms for stress and anxiety. What we take into our bodies also has a big effect on our ability to connect with our inner voice. Sugar, alcohol, drugs, and processed foods, they all numb our senses and thus our ability to connect with our intuition. If we want to develop our inner knowing, we must consciously choose foods that work well with our bodies. And this is probably going to be a process of trial and error for all of you. I really don't believe that there is one overall diet that is perfect for everyone. And usually what we need to eat tends to change over time as well. Moving on, emotional charge. This is another thing that can really affect intuition. So, for example, if you have a crush on someone or you desperately want a certain job, really, essentially, it can be anything where you are very invested in a certain outcome. Now, this effectively cuts you off from everything because your ego has already decided that it knows what's best. Listening to and following your intuition, it requires a certain amount of detachment to the outcome. And it's only really in this way that we open ourselves to new perspectives and possibilities. So if you're in this kind of situation, it's really best to try your best to calm down, and really just kind of open yourself up to the possibility of other eventualities happening and what the benefits of those could be as well. Another big thing that affects our intuition is the media that we're consuming. Like billions of dollars are spent each year on shaping the public's tastes and opinions. And, this has been going on for a very long time. If you've ever read Ed Bernay's book, Propaganda, you'll realize that the key figures in positions of power have an excellent grasp on human psychology. And, they are really skilled at manipulating the masses. If you look in depth at any mainstream content, it's clear that it has a self-serving agenda, usually to sell products or subtly promote certain social constructs. And this usually benefits like big business or like the ruling elite. And this takes away from our inner knowing, because essentially it's putting ideas in our head that are not our own. And, they're often not really in our best interests. I don't know, I could think of like fast food or something like that would not be in your best interest to go and eat that. And, like, even if you just think about if you're like watching Netflix every night, the time that you're spending doing that is taking a focus away from your own life. And, you're just kind of in a state of connecting outside of yourself. And you're not really engaged in your own life and connecting with what's good for you and what's bad for you, and that's really why a lot of people really do feel lost in life. So one of the next blockages to intuition, one of my favorites, is unresolved trauma. So this keeps us locked in egoic, fear-based thoughts. And these keep us away from being able to hear our intuition. The ego loves to present itself as intuition, especially when a part of us is stuck in trauma, because this part really wants to protect us from experiencing the same trauma again. So an example could be if somebody has a childhood trauma around abandonment. Now, the fear of abandonment is going to drown out a person's inner voice when they are in a toxic relationship. They're ignoring the inner voice telling them that the situation is harmful to them. And, it's maybe saying they should consider leaving, because the fear of this traumatized part, it fears being alone more than it, wants to take a chance on getting another kind of solution. But as we get to the place where we're healing our trauma, we're going to be more conscious of our patterns and more willing, when we notice that we're in these situations and patterns, to try different behaviors and hopefully get different outcomes. Pain and illness. These can also affect a person's ability to connect to their intuition. And it can do positively and negatively. So obviously, if you are suffering from chronic pain and illnesses, it's going to affect your ability to connect with your intuition negatively, especially if you're on pharmaceuticals. And often too, if we think about body pain and illness, it really can actually be caused at some level by not listening to our inner voice in the first place. But on the other hand, when we are suffering from a health crisis, it can be an opportunity to go deep into healing ourselves, and it can be a place where we reconnect with our inner knowing. Often major illnesses are a catalyst for a spiritual awakening. In this next section, I'm going to outline some of the ways in which we can help to develop and connect in with our intuition. Okay, firstly, I'm going to give 3 everyday activities that will help hone your intuition. And then I'm going to list the numerous ways that our inner knowing actually communicates with us, so you can recognize them. Okay, so the primary activity to connect with your intuition is, well, you guessed it, meditation. I know everyone always talks about meditation, and I was pretty resistant to it for a long time, but it really is the number one thing that is going to help you connect with your intuition and on your spiritual path in general. Okay, so next up is journaling. Yeah, another popular one, I know, but it really, again, it works. And it's important to journal both about your waking life and your dreams. And third, yeah, another maybe like obvious one, but waking mindfulness. So it's really just like when trying to be as much as possible present in the moment. Um, the more that we can develop this like observer perspective of things that are going on in our lives, the more that we're going to be able to notice our egos and our patterns. You know, like when we notice ourselves in a pattern, we can be like, oh, right, I'm doing this again, and oh, this was related to this experience. So that's interesting. And you know, as we do this more and more, we can recognize what's coming from ego, essentially, and then it's much easier to see, oh yeah, this definitely is an intuitive insight coming through. Okay, so next I'm going to explain how exactly our intuition connects with us, because everybody connects with their intuition in a slightly different way and have different strengths and weaknesses. I think so far I've mostly talked about connecting in with our inner voice, but actually there are multiple ways in which our intuition can basically convey messages to us. Actually, like the inner voice is probably like one of the harder ones to discern, because the ego is so good at being a trickster. And I guess like a great practical way of discernment really for this one, as I've mentioned before, is keeping a journal. Because if you get a particular hunch, you know, you can write that down, and then you can come back to it and see, you know, which hunches came true, and you're going to get a better idea of, you know, what the inner voice sounds like. I mean, really, when your higher self is communicating to you, it's often quite a quiet voice, and it's usually very unemotional. It just, you know, even though something really quite intense could be happening to you, it's just kind of like, oh, well, you know, this and this. And it has a certain energy about it. And as you get more practiced at listening to it, you're just really going to recognize that. Body cues. So these are a great way of determining whether something is right or wrong for us. I mean, I'm sure we've all had the experience of having like a gut feeling that something is like wrong. And when we are going against ourselves, we're always going to have some kind of resistance in the body to going in that direction. Because I've been working with like energy for many years, I can sort of feel that resistance in my body. But I mean, another great way of doing it that's perhaps easier for a lot of people is to do muscle testing. And that just gives a clear like yes or no as to whether something is good for you. You know, and really like the body is governed by the heart, which is really the center of intuition. Okay, so if you're interested in learning some muscle testing techniques, I'm going to put some links in the description below. Signs and symbols. So things that we see in our everyday life gives us clues as to which direction we should head in, or if the universe is like supporting us in a certain direction, it's going to show us some support. So yeah, like I'm sure you're all familiar with seeing like 111 or 222, and you know, that's often our intuition telling us that we're on the right path. I mean, sometimes the signs and the symbols, it could be like a message on a poster or somebody's t-shirt, or a bumper sticker or a road sign or something. And when this happens, it's generally going to be accompanied by like this feeling of aha, like this moment, like, oh, that's kind of how I experience intuition. It's just an experience of like, oh, right, yeah, okay, this is a message for me. So I can give you an example. I've made 2 international moves in my life, and like a year or more like before I made the move, and I wasn't even thinking about moving countries, I got given a gift from both the countries that I was going to move to, and these were like kind of cheesy tourist gifts with the name of the country on it. I mean, some people are going to say, oh, that's just coincidence, but honestly, I think not. I don't get a lot of like gifts like that, so yeah. I've also had not so subtle messages, like periods of time in my life where I was like constantly banging my head on everything. And that was when I was like in the middle of toxic relationships. It's important to remember that we live in a quantumly entangled universe. What we're like, the energy that we're putting out, we're getting back. And, you know, like tools such as like tarot and oracle cards, they're also a great example of how this this process of like signs essentially works. Okay, so lastly, dreams and visions. So I think I've touched on this before. So you may be meditating and you get visions in your meditations, and then dreaming at night. These are all going to be messages from your subconscious. I mean, not every dream and meditation is significant, and that's really why journaling is important, so that you can get good at decoding them. I mean, at first I would suggest getting a dream interpretation book, and then over time you're really going to know what symbols actually mean for you, rather than the more generalized approach. But that's going to be helpful to you in the beginning. Well, I think that's everything I wanted to talk about. I hope that I've helped you have a better understanding of how intuition works, and that I've given you some insight into how to better connect with yours. If you like this video, please hit the like and subscribe button. And if you'd like a personal session with me, please visit my website, cosmicfairy777.com. The link is in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and have yourselves a wonderful day, and namaste.